This is Roberta Green in interview with Jean Reynolds on September 12th, 2015. Our topic today will be Jean's dad, Sid Davis. Hi, Jean.
Hi, Roberta.
Could you please tell us your father's name, his year of birth, and birthplace?
His name was Sidney Robert Davis, and he was born in Morrison Township near Severn Bridge, Ontario, about February the 5th, 1894.
Now, I think Sid's family came from over the ocean. Could you just give us a brief history of his family?
They did. They were originally from Wales, and we determined that the name Davis actually came from St. David. And when they left Wales, they moved to Northern Ireland, to Ballynahinch in County Down in the north of Ireland.
Now, at some point, they came to Canada. And that's fine. We don't
Yes.
have to know exactly when. Did they come right to Severn Bridge initially?
I believe they settled for a bit somewhere near Ottawa, but then decided they were interested in farming, so they came further north to Muskoka and settled there, built their home and barn for the animals, and stayed there for the rest of their lives.
They had quite a large family. Could you tell us about Sid's siblings?
Yes, they had 8 children. My father was the eldest. There were 4 boys and 4 girls.
Who took over the farm?
My father's brother, Lee, he was the next eldest son. And he stayed and looked after the farm and raised his family there.
Did your dad help out with him, with his brother on the farm, or not at that point?
Not at that point, no.
Does your dad still have property in that area?
No, he does not.
But he had a lot there
He
for
did.
a while?
When my grandmother died, she left one of the lots on the Severn River to each member of the family. And since my father was the eldest, he had the first lot. And I obtained that after my father's death. And we kept it for a bit. But then, because we had property around Huntsville, we sold the lot.
Did you ever go down to see it? Did you ever drive down in that area?
Oh yes, go every 2 years for the Davis family reunion.
Oh, wonderful.
And the view there is beautiful to see all those yachts and sailboats going down the river, and they all wave when we're on the shore.
That's a wonderful thing. Good. You mentioned to me about twins in the family.
Yes.
Sidney was not a twin, though, was he?
No, he was not.
No.
But checking the genealogical family chart, there's been a set of twins in each generation. And my brother Robert, or Bob, we called him, he had twin girls.
And I think there was some left-handedness passed down through
Yes,
the family,
in
too.
each generation. I've checked recently, and it's even down to the grandchildren. There's one in each generation.
Going back to Sid growing up, some of his jobs around the home would have had to do with the farming, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Did he look after the animals in
He
any
did.
way?
Yes.
What did they have there?
Pardon?
What kind of animals, what livestock did they have?
Oh, cattle and turkeys. My grandmother had a large flock of turkeys. And of course they had huge gardens and fruit trees, more like an orchard around the farmhouse.
Would give a lot of food for the winter.
Yes.
Important. Now, did Sid go to school down in that area near the farm?
He did, to a one-room school. It's still visible from the highway. Now, the highway's been put through, of course.
And
Yes.
a church in the area also?
Yes, the Davis family helped to build the church.
There are ministers in your family too, I believe.
Yes, there were 3 ministers.
Let's follow Sid a little bit further along in his life. At some point he moved to Hamilton, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He worked in a men's clothing store there. And that's where he met my mother. And they kept in touch all the while, you know, more or less, while he was overseas during the war.
She must be very worried about him.
Yes.
And so that leads us into his military history. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. He was in Belgium and France. He talked about Ypres and Mons, and he became very close friends with the family in Belgium and kept in touch with them even over the years after he returned home. Excuse me. And during the First War, the military were given what's called a tote of liquor. And my father didn't drink, so he would sell his to his fellow soldiers and save the money. And on his days off, he would take trips to Ireland or England to check on our ancestry.
Good for him. You have a beautiful photograph of your dad from the war. I think it's the one I'm looking at here. Can you tell me what's in the frame there?
Well, he brought back his uniform intact, you know, with all his medals and buttons and everything.
Good.
And they were, of course, in latter years, they were in pretty hard shape. They were tarnished.
Yeah.
And so we had to determine what to do with them. So I had the medals and the buttons all cleaned and framed with a picture of him in his uniform.
It's a wonderful tribute to him, isn't it?
Well, I had one for my son, one for my daughter, and one for my godson, Grant Nichols.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And all the rest of his equipment, including some of the buttons and pins, I sent to my brother's son in Thorold because he made one of those boxes, shadow box,
Oh, yes.
of all of the war paraphernalia. So he's got a lot of it too.
Wonderful. You had written down his battalion number and things like that too, didn't you?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Pass.
He belonged to the 102nd Battalion, 11th Brigade, 4th Canadian Division in France.
You know, that's enough detail. People could look that up on the internet and find a lot of information about him that way. And
My
about that
niece did
unit.
once when she was in Ottawa, and she got me some information too.
That was not an easy war.
Oh no, not at all.
No.
And there was a lot of shelling, and the men were in trenches, as they called it, and they were full of mud and dirt. And on one occasion, my father was stationed with 3 other soldiers in a trench, and they took a direct hit, and my father was the only one to survive. And he always credited it to the fact that his mother had given him a small Bible to carry in his pocket. But he also felt guilty.
I think that was a common feeling.
Yes,
Yes. I'm sure he had nightmares for
yeah,
many years from that as well. Maybe it never goes away.
no.
No. Well, he stayed right until the end of the war, didn't he?
Yes.
He fought right
Yes.
until the end.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what year. Was it 1919? You said that he actually returned. Maybe.
Sorry, I'm not positive.
That's okay. But he came up to Huntsville soon after, didn't he?
Yes.
After the war.
Yes, he did, to work in the Bethune Pulp and Lumber Company as bookkeeper.
Can you tell us why he would have come up this way? Was it to do with the Whiteside?
Yes, his uncle Bob Whiteside owned a mill here, and his brother John owned one as well. But it was Bob Whiteside that my father connected with, and Mr. Whiteside sent my son to Duluth, Minnesota to take a bookkeeping course so he could come back and do the bookkeeping for the Bethune Mill. And this, of course, he quite enjoyed, but he also kept books for a Mr. Nielsen, J.B. Nielsen, who had a lumber company in
Was
Huntsville.
that in Huntsville also?
Yes, yes. And he also got involved in other activities, in town.
Oh, we're going to talk about that because I know he
Yes.
was very much involved with our community.
He came to Huntsville about 1919
Okay.
to work for the lumber company, the Bethune Lumber Company, and was bookkeeper till 1935.
That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think at some point he wrote a little bit of a history about the Bethune
He did.
Lumber Company. I was wondering if you could read that to us now.
The Bethune Pulp and Lumber Company. Huntsville, Ontario was organized September 27th, 1917, letters patent, under the Ontario Companies Act with the following officers: Richard G. Dinsmore, President of Sales; Charles L. Dinsmore, Vice President of Bush Operators; and in 1919, Sidney Robert Davis, Secretary, Treasurer, and Bookkeeper. He returned from the Army July of 1919. The company was formed for the purpose of taking the lumber off the lumber limits originally controlled by the late Mr. John Whiteside. Mr. Whiteside passed away September 26, 1911, age 58, leaving his wife Emma and also two daughters, Seda and Isla. Uncle John at the time was living in the home which was built for him, now owned by Mr. and Mrs. Claude Wardell. After the passing of Uncle John, Uncle Robert Whiteside of Duluth, Minnesota, came to the widow's and daughter's help. Uncle John owned the property between Burnell Road and the river from the present McCaffrey home down to the high school. Also, two homes on the west side of Burnell Road. His lumber mill was built on the riverbank in the bay where the Mother's Bake Shop now stands, north of the present road, going to the park and the community center. The property mentioned along the river and Burnell Road was his lumber yard. Slabs and wood were piled on the property south of the mill. Also stables and office were there. Uncle John's original home was on the now Charles Booth home property at the corner of Burnell Road and the Park Road. This was a fine home, but it was burnt to the ground. He then built the Claude Wardell house. During the spring and summer, the river was full of logs for the mills. These were in booms, and often when the steamboat, the Algonquin, came along, the boom of logs had to be moved to make passage for the boat. The cement base for the mill's steam engine was still in place in the late 1960s. The Bethune Pulp and Lumber Company in 1917 installed a rossing machine for pulpwood in the old mill belonging to the Huntsville Lumber Company on Hunters Bay, about where the oil and gas tanks are today. The rossing plant was only operated for 1 or 2 seasons, then the machinery was sold. From 1918 on, the company went in for logs. The logs were sawn into lumber by the Huntsville Lumber Company, and per 1,000 feet, if my memory does not fail me. The hardwood was sawn into lumber, and loaded on cars at $10 per thousand softwood and $8 per thousand. Their mill and yard was the property now owned by the Acme Planing Mills. The men who operated the Huntsville Lumber Company were Mr. Orville Tate, who owned the home where Mr. Frank Hutchison now lives. Also, Orville's brother-in-law, Mr. E.C. Wainwright, who owned the big white house on the corner, east of the West End Motors. These two men were the dead opposite. Mr. O.D. Tate did like his spirits, and Mr. E.C. Wainwright did enjoy his tea. Besides, he was a great churchman, and I don't think O.D. Tate ever darkened a church door. Getting back to Bethune, when they took over, the John Whiteside Lumber Company, also the Riverside Lumber Company, there were 2 timber berths controlled by the Department of Lands and Forests, Toronto. The timber was paid for on a stumpage basis. So many dollars per 1,000. Hardwood was one price, softwood was another price. for that matter, the different species of both hardwood and softwood were a different price. There was one berth in Bethune Pulp and one berth in Sinclair Township. Then about 1921, R.G. Dinsmore, president of Bethune, made a deal with the Department of Lands and Forests for the west half of Finlayson Township. The company most always operated 2 company camps every winter. Also, one or more jobbers or contractors. Some of these jobbers or contractors were such men as Mr. Hugh Hill, Mr. Harry Jones, and Mr. Mackenzie Ward. Some of the company foremen were Mr. Bert Porter, Mr. George Haynes, Mr. John Leith, Mr. Harry Joyner, Mr. Walter Haynes, and Mr. Lou Whiteside. Logging back in the 1920s was an expensive operation before the logs landed at the mill, especially for hardwood logs. The company would organize a peeling camp so as the bark on the hardwood trees would peel off. They would send a gang of men into the bush with a foreman. The foreman would have a man or men spot the hardwood trees that the sawyers were to cut down. The leaves would draw all the sap out of the tree, so the log in the tree should dry out during the summer. Then early in the fall, the winter gang would be sent into camp. Excuse me. They would saw the peeled trees into log lengths, 10 inches, no, 12 inches, 14 inches, and 16 inches. Then the skidding gang would follow the sawyers. The skidding was all done by horses. The logs were hauled out of the bush to a skidding bay along the main draw road. The main draw roads were cut through the bush and road graded early in the fall. The main road always had to water the Big East River or a lake, for once the cold weather excuse me, set in during December, the teams arrived in camp. To have the logs to the water, the load team would leave camp around 5 a.m. for his first load of logs. They would dinner out in the bush. He would be back in camp about 3 p.m. The idea of the early shunt for the first team is it lets the last team on the log haul back to camp before dark. When the logs were peeled in long rows, possibly 20 feet high, this operation is done by a jammer. It picks the log off the sleigh and places it on the dump. The logs on Crown land were sealed by government sealers when the logs were on the skidway. Logs purchased from foremen as logs off company deeded lots were sealed by our own company sealer. Some of these men are as follows: Charles Dinsmore, Charles Eagle, Jim Nicklin. In the last few years, the company decided to spot paint the end of each log so it would show up when sorting the logs in Hunter's Bay the next summer. Bethune picked green as the color they would use. Huntsville Lumber followed by using red. The Muskoka Wood Company decided on white. I may add here this was my idea at first. It did not go over very big with Charles D. Dinsmore. However,
And that's the end of his written notes
Yes.
about that, isn't
Yes.
it?
yes, it is.
We are so fortunate that he would write all of that down, because it's a fabulous piece of history. Do you want to take a little sip of water
Yes, I-
before I ask you the next question? Because I did want to speak to you about the fact that he ended up being quite a conservationist of the land.
Absolutely. He had a complete about turn.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
I'm not quite sure, but I know somewhere along the line the government was offering free, plants to anyone that would plant them themselves and start a new forest.
What land was he planting onto?
Well, he had a lot of property out in Chaffee Township and Finlayson,
Oh, yes.
and also, out, I can't remember the township. But
How did he come to have so much land?
the company, finally had to shut down. There was too much competition, and they owed him back salary, so they gave him all this property in lieu of money.
And he was very wise in
He
the way
was.
he used it.
He was.
He went on to do some other jobs in Huntsville. I think he was employed at the liquor store, was he?
That's right. After he left the mill, he worked managed the liquor store from, about 1935. And by the way, while he was in Huntsville, he lived at the Kent House.
Oh.
You know, that was a rooming house down on the corner on Main.
The corner of Main and Brunel, maybe?
Correct.
Is that where Kent Park is now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And he was, of course, any of the war veterans sort of had first choice for jobs.
Good.
So he acquired the position of postmaster when the post office was in the town hall, and he worked there as postmaster from 1941 to 1961. And that was about the time the post office was moved from the town hall to the location where it is at present.
That's a big change.
Mm-hmm.
You were telling me about rural post offices too.
Oh, yes, he became inspector for the rural post offices, and he had to examine each one on a regular basis.
How did he get around to those?
Well, he didn't drive. He could drive a team of horses, but he
Well,
couldn't
of
drive
course.
a car. So, by this time, he had remarried, and Mother Irene drove a car. My own mother had died in 1944.
And she was way too young to die, wasn't she?
Yes, yes. So anyway, I can recall when I went with him once, that trip we went out on the Algonquin to the Big One Inn to check the post office, and they had us stay for lunch. It's a beautiful trip.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely memory.
Yep.
Must be special for your dad to have you with him, too.
Well, he liked to have company, you know. And while he was postmaster at the town hall, he found C.O. Shaw, who owned the Anglo-Canadian Leather Company. He found him out collapsed in the snow behind the post office, and he got him help.
There's a little known piece of history in
Yes,
Huntsville.
and of course, Mr. Shaw knew my father too, because he was my father was treasurer of the Anglo-Canadian band,
Oh, was he?
which was also part of Mr. Shaw's endeavors.
Your dad wrote a little bit of a history of the post office.
He did.
Would
Yes.
you mind reading that to us? Because
Okay.
he's gone to a lot of work to write down some of the details.
He has. And he was left-handed, so it's ready. Totally clear.
You're doing well reading it.
My experience, Sidney R. Davis, in the post office from June 1st, 1941 to February 4th, 1961. The hours at the post office these days were: the wickets open to the public 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Holidays, and certain holidays, wickets open for 4 hours. Other holidays open 2 hours. For regular business, even to Christmas Day. Saturday, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Henry Tebby and myself would take over the wickets. Mail was received and dispatched to and from the Canadian National Railway. 2 mail trains from the south and 2 mail trains from the north. The trains from the south were number 44 and 46. From the north, number 41 and 47. Trains 46 and 47 arrived early in the morning, and if on time, was sorted into the private boxes by 8 a.m. Trains number 41 and 44 arrived about 1 or 2 p.m. The mail bags from the post office to the CNR station were contracted for by Mr. Gordon Middleton, Sr. When I was installed as postmaster, I purchased from my predecessor, Mr. Mayhew, a canceling machine he had been using in the post office. This machine saved the post office many hours in canceling the stamps. Instead of doing the canceling by hand, the post office management appreciated the writer having the machine in the office, to the point I had to pay for any part or parts for the machine. The same treatment was in effect for my adding machine, covering 20 years. This machine, too, saved the post office many hours. During the years 1941 to 1960, the office handled such lines as follows, which they no longer handle: Post Office Savings Bank, War Savings and Stamps, War Savings Certificates, Government Annuities, Radio Licenses, Eden's Catalogs, and Simpson's Catalogs.
Again, isn't that a wonderful piece of history?
Yeah, my father was involved in many areas in Huntsville.
Absolutely,
He was a town councillor from 1932 to 34. He was chairman of the Board of Education in Huntsville And then District of Muskoka Board of Education. He helped judge the animals at the agricultural fair, fall fair. He was treasurer of the Huntsville Hospital Organization, and he, along with Reverend Frank Milligan, and there was another one.
Mr. Rice, maybe
Sorry?
Harmon Rice?
Oh yes, Harmon Rice that owned the forester. The three of them worked to bring the hospital here to Huntsville.
That was the Red Cross Hospital, wasn't
Yes,
it?
yes,
Okay.
it was a Red Cross hospital. He was also treasurer of the All Saints Cemetery Board and acquired a plot in the first cemetery out in Hutchison's Memorial Cemetery. He acquired the plot for our whole family. He helped with the Boy Scouts Apple Day for 17 years,
That's a long time.
and he has a plaque of appreciation from the Boy Scout Association.
He deserves that.
He was a life member and treasurer of the Masonic Lodge, AF and AM. He worked on for the Chamber of Commerce for Huntsville after he retired from the post office, and helped in a booth down on the highway for 14 years, visiting the resorts and helping the tourists find their chosen location, and help promote tourism in this area.
You told me something about him driving tourists sometimes to
Oh
the lodges.
yes, that he would do that because it was difficult sometimes to explain to them how to get there. Oh, and on one of his lots where he planted trees, he had large evergreen trees, and excuse me, he ended up providing Simpsons with an extra large, no, I'm sorry, it's Eden's, bad mistake, with a large Christmas tree to put outside of their business location in Toronto,
A Muskoka tree.
a Muskoka tree.
Lovely. That would have been a very big tree.
Yeah, yeah. And they'd send up a transport to move it down there.
What a sight that would be.
Yes, I saw one of them. It was very impressive, all lit up. Very nice.
Did you go down with your dad to see that?
Yes,
That's a
probably
special
on
thing
the
to do.
train. You see, the train was running right through to North Bay at that time.
Yes.
Mhm.
He was extremely involved in the history of our town,
Absolutely.
in almost every aspect.
Yes, and at the same time, he was very much involved in researching his own family history and genealogy.
I don't know how he fit in everything he did.
Busy, busy.
Because he had a home life as well.
Oh, yes.
He had 2 marriages,
Yes.
and how many children?
Well, he ended up with 4 because Mother Irene had a son and daughter as well as my father. So we had a nice, loving family, four of us, 2 boys and 2 girls.
That was beautiful.
Mhm.
He also lived in many locations in Huntsville too.
Yes.
What would you say? Well, the Kent House was one location where he lived.
And then when he and my mother were first married and came to town, they had a little cottage down on Main Street, almost directly across from Tall Trees Restaurant.
Okay. Yep.
And then after that, they moved up to the top of Lansdowne and Dufferin, just below the Reservoir Hill.
And that was a big land holding there,
Oh,
wasn't
it was. He had a garden from the Reservoir Hill right down to Mary Street. There were no other buildings there.
That's huge.
Yes.
Orchards, I think you mentioned in there too.
Pardon?
Orchards? Did he have fruit trees in there?
Not too many.
Not in
He
there.
did have a few, but not too many. But,
What other locations he...
and then from there they moved down to the corner of Center, and it was Lansdowne, I believe. Now it's Veterans Way.
Oh, yes.
Right across from the curling club.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Was that his last home that he
Yes.
owned?
Yes.
And is that where he passed away?
No, he passed away in the hospital.
Okay. How old was your dad when he died?
91. And
That's
they
beautiful.
were.
You've got good genes in you, Jean.
Oh, I hope. No, they gave him the best care in the hospital, but he had a terminal illness and he was too old, to undergo surgery or anything, so
Yes.
he just passed away.
I have down August 4th, 1985. Does that sound correct?
I believe it is, yes.
But that is a good long life, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, everything he did, he was always working to make the community a better place, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
In any way,
Yes.
in so many ways, he helped Huntsville develop
Yeah.
and become a happier, healthier,
Yes.
safer place to live.
And a lot of the men that worked for the Bethune ended up, living or retiring in Huntsville.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're very thankful to your dad for his many contributions, and we're very thankful to you, Jean, for sharing your dad's story. Thank
Well,
you
thank
very
you.
much. This has been wonderful today.